Welcome to Chapter 16, and this is our last chapter of new material for the year, all about the ocean. Our case study focuses on the phenomenon of overfishing. The Atlantic cod fisheries in the US and Canada have basically collapsed due to the use of new technology for commercial fishing. No one could have imagined that these fish that have been so essential to the East Coast fishing industry could be devastated so quickly. The ocean covers most of the Earth's surface, about 71%, and contains about 98% of the planet's water. However, we've only mapped about 20% of it. We've mapped more of the moon and Mars than our own ocean. We're going to talk more about that later and some of the efforts that are being made to continue this mapping. The seafloor has lots of diverse topography, more so than the surface of the land. The deepest trench is 7 miles. There's so much to learn about the ocean. We're going to be doing a lab later this week to explore salinity and currents of the ocean. Ocean water, of course, has salt, but also low levels of nutrients. Keep in mind that colder, saltier water sinks and warmer, less salty water stays on the surface. Water has a very high heat capacity, so the ocean is very stable when it comes to temperature. In fact, the ocean helps regulate climate on Earth because it helps to move heat around. The layers of the ocean have names. The surface zone is the warmest layer of water. Below it is a pycnocline, where the density increases with depth. The deep zone is below it, and it's full of dense, sluggish water, and it is unaffected by the weather on the Earth's surface. Ocean water flows horizontally in currents because of density differences, gravity, and wind. These currents influence climate in El Niño and La Niña. They transport heat, nutrients, pollution, and living organisms, including ships. The Gulf Stream current moderates the climate of Europe. Without it, it would be very cold. Here's a map showing some of the major ocean currents around the world. There are also vertical movements in the ocean. Upwellings bring cold water to the surface and bring lots of fish with them. Downwellings are where the currents kind of crash together and sink. This horizontal and vertical movement impacts climate. The whole worldwide current system is called thermohaline circulation, with the warmer and fresher water on the surface and the colder, saltier, denser water below it. Changes to thermohaline circulation could cause a lot of climate change. For example, melting ice from Greenland will make the surface waters less dense because of all that fresh water, and it could stop some of the circulation and really impact that climate of Europe. We talked about El Niño before. It's also called ENSO. Remember that wind blowing from the east to the west causes water to pile up in the western Pacific, and it also causes upwellings along the coast of South America, which brings good fishing conditions, especially near Peru and Ecuador. When the pressure decreases, that warm water that has piled up flows back eastward and suppresses those upwellings. This can cause the fishing industry to crash on the coast of South America. La Niña has the opposite effect, where cold waters rise and move westward. La Niña was responsible for killing over 80% of the marine iguanas on some of the islands of the Galapagos one year because of the cold temperatures. The ENSO cycles may be increasing in strength and frequency as the climate changes. We've already learned that the combustion of fossil fuels adds carbon dioxide to the atmosphere and that the ocean absorbs a great deal of it like a sponge. This carbon dioxide makes the ocean more acidic, and ocean acidification makes it difficult for marine organisms that use shells to form their shells, including anything with a shell like a shellfish, but also corals. We talked about names for the water layers of the ocean, but the ecosystems in the ocean also get named in zones. The photic zone gets lots of sunlight and has high primary productivity. The pelagic zone is a habitat between the surface and the bottom of the ocean, and the benthic zone is on the bottom, just like we call the bottom of a pond or a lake. Ocean life is rich, from the smallest microscopic phytoplankton to the top-level predators. And phytoplankton actually produce the majority of oxygen for our planet, but get very few accolades for all of their work. The animals of the ocean have amazing adaptations to be successful wherever they live, such as those that live in the deep, dark, high-pressure portions of the ocean. Some even host symbiotic bacteria for bioluminescence. There are whole ecosystems based on chemosynthesis at the hydrothermal vents rather than photosynthesis. And you may be wondering why there's a picture of David Hasselhoff. That's because this deep sea crab is called the David Hasselhoff crab because it's hairy like his chest. Kelp forests are an important part of the ocean. They serve as food and shelter for many organisms, just like a forest would on land. And additionally, we use kelp for food, cosmetics, etc. It's in most ice cream that you buy at the grocery store. Coral reefs are made of tiny colonial invertebrates that host symbiotic algae called zooxanthellae. And of course, coral live in these colonial reefs, and they protect shorelines by absorbing waves. And when coral are distressed, they will throw out their symbiotic algae friends, which can cause them to lose their color, and eventually the coral will die. So it's a first step toward coral death. It's called coral bleaching. It can happen because of something like climate change or pollution. The intertidal zone is where the ocean meets land. And if you've ever been to the beach, tide pools would be part of this ecosystem. Intertidal zones are tough to live in because of changing temperatures, salinity, and changing water levels, but they have a great diversity of life, including starfish, crabs, anemones. I have even snorkeled in a large tidal pool that had sharks in it, little baby sharks. Salt marshes are areas on the coastline of temperate areas, so along the United States would be a great example, and they're critical for wildlife. They're basically like wetlands are inland. They have the same ecosystem service functions. They filter out pollution. They help stabilize the shoreline against storm surges as well. And like our freshwater wetlands, salt marshes are endangered because people like to drain them for coastal building projects. As you move farther south into tropical zones, salt marshes are replaced by mangroves. Mangroves are salt-tolerant trees with these very distinctive stilt roots, and they're important areas for wildlife and nurseries for fish. Over half of our world's mangrove forests have been destroyed because of development, and we've lost many of the key ecosystem services provided by them, which are similar to those provided by salt marshes. Estuaries are where the freshwater and the saltwater come together when rivers flow into the ocean. These are important zones for many fish and other wildlife, and they are also an area affected by coastal development. Marine pollution is one of the biggest environmental issues regarding the ocean. The non-point source pollution load is huge and includes all kinds of trash and chemicals. Nets and plastic trash are dangerous for wildlife that might be strangled or might eat them and die of ingestion issues. Remember that all plastic that's been created is still around, even though it might be a tiny pellet floating in the ocean at this point. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is the size of Texas. This problem is so vast that experts say it's futile to try to clean it up. And in fact, a better approach is to use our money and resources to stop future pollution. The worst oil spill in history was the Deepwater Horizon spill off the coast of Louisiana. Oil spills kill wildlife, make beaches dirty, and ruin fisheries. Even small boats contribute to the oil leak problem. Some toxins in the ocean, such as mercury, make certain top predators dangerous for the vulnerable population, such as pregnant women and children, to ingest in quantity. Remember that heavy metals, such as mercury, will bioaccumulate and biomagnify as they move up the food chain. So it's best to avoid swordfish, shark, and tuna if you are in that group. If you are a seafood lover and you want to make more sustainable choices as a consumer, the Monterey Bay Aquarium puts out an annual seafood watch list naming the best and the worst choices, and you can find that online if you just Google Seafood Watch. We've talked about eutrophication, but one specific type of algal bloom in the ocean can result from excess nutrients and cause what's called a red tide. This particular algae can cause extreme sickness in people who eat shellfish that were caught during a bloom because the algae has a toxin. And just like we talked about before, eutrophication, we talked about the Gulf of Mexico having a dead zone. These marine dead zones are actually found around the world. Overharvesting may be the world's worst ocean problem. And you can see that it's been a huge issue and it's increasing, and ocean fisheries may collapse in your lifetime. And overfishing is nothing new, it's just become more extreme. Sea creatures have been hunted to extinction for years, and many of the remaining species are in trouble. Industrialized fishing, like industrialized farming, uses high volume and high technology techniques to harvest, this time huge volumes of fish rather than growing huge amounts of food. You need to know these different types of fishing techniques. Drift nets are vertical nets hanging in the water. Long lines are long lines, just like it says, but with many baited hooks attached. And trawling is pulling a cone-shaped net behind a boat, often dragging it along the ocean floor. Almost all commercial fishing techniques have an issue with bycatch, which is accidentally catching animals such as dolphins, sea turtles, birds, or seals. Dolphin as bycatch has been a huge issue that was brought to the public's eye, and because of that, there were some changes that took place in the 1970s. So one thing you can do as a consumer, if you like to eat tuna, is look for the Dolphin Safe Tuna seal, which is standard on Dolphin Safe tuna packages. Trawling on the bottom of the ocean is very damaging to ocean habitat. It's as damaging as clear cutting or strip mining would be on the land. So the impact of industrialized fishing is that 90% of large-bodied fish and shark are eliminated within 10 years of introducing industrialized fishing to an area. And even though many of our fishing stocks have crashed, the global catch has remained stable, but only because the fishing fleets are traveling farther, fishing deeper, spending more time fishing, and using improved technology to make that catch. Also, we're fishing down the food chain, which means we're eating smaller and less desirable species. It's time for the fishing industry to shift to a maximum sustainable yield approach, just like we do with logging, so that there will actually be a maximum harvest, but fish will remain stable for the future. Much like we have national parks on the land, we can have marine protected areas and marine reserves in the ocean. MPAs are the least restrictive form of protection. They still allow for fishing, but the reserves do not. Marine reserves have been successful at increasing biodiversity and biomass. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we really have so much left to learn about the ocean. We've only mapped 20% of it. And clearly the ocean is vital to every citizen of planet Earth, but sometimes it's hard to feel connected to the ocean when you live so far away from it. And that's why I applied to become a Science Communication Fellow with the Ocean Exploration Trust. I got to hear Dr. Robert Ballard, the guy who found the Titanic and invented ROV technology, speak early in my teaching career, and again when he was a guest speaker here at LHS just a couple years ago. His tales of the ocean were deeply moving to me and the students who were with me, and it made me want to do more to try to help Kansans connect to the ocean. So my deep sea expedition has been delayed due to COVID, but in 2022 I will set sail with the Nautilus, the ship you see here, a research ship, for a deep sea expedition, and I'll be working in the control room pictured here. Please join my 4th hour class if possible in hosting Dr. Ballard live on Thursday, May 6th to hear his exciting tales of ocean exploration. And this is just a little quick peek at what happens as a science communication fellow. I would be sitting in the little control room, and we would have video rolling, and there would be scientists, and there would be ROV pilots, and the ROVs have remote cameras. They're like robots under the ocean, collecting data, collecting samples, and I would be helping to interpret what is going on in the video for the public, because they live stream from the ship pretty much 24/7 during the deep sea expeditions. And you can follow this year's expeditions, even though they're not taking, they're just taking a skeleton crew. They are kicking off their season in July. All right, in conclusion, every citizen on our planet needs the ocean and must work to protect the marine environment from overfishing, pollution, and ocean acidification. You can make a difference through your consumer choices and by educating others around you.